now, what you've got is one successful life form, and that is Bitcoin. And so you've got one successful digital property. And now we actually have an engineered property. And so you have a scientific basis for property rights. Mm-hmm. And we never had it before. And it's illustrated pretty effectively. It's like, if you have $1 million and you convert the million into a building, well, the building can be seized by the mayor. By eminent domain, you can lose your building. And you can't move the building. So that the building is impaired property, and the building can be taxed. It is immobile. It can be seized. It can be taxed. And it also has physical nexus, which means, a meteorite can fall on it, or an earthquake can wipe it out. So there are risks to the building. The useful life of the building is 100 years, maybe less if it's poorly constructed. So, and it's only appealing to people in that geographic political nexus. If the building was in North Korea, how valuable is a building in North Korea to an investment company in New York City?
Right.
So a building as property leaves a lot to be desired. Land as property has the same issue. A block in Manhattan is a lot more valuable than a block, in the middle of the desert. Yeah. Because the land is geographically located next to a lot of investors with a lot of money that can actually develop the land for some economic purpose. And the land can be impaired and taxed. So these are high maintenance properties. They're very expensive and not very portable.
Yeah.
So you can rifle through the properties. Well, there's art, there's gold, there's silver, there's commodities, there's securities, there are bonds, there are currency baskets. They all have some liability. Many of them are currency derivatives, and so as currency derivatives, they have an dilution coming from the inflation of the underlying currency. Mm-hmm. But the ones that have physicality are subject to search and seizure and impairment because you can't move them. And then others are unique maybe, but even though you might own art, people are going to keep making more, or they're going to keep making more art. And so if you're looking for a property that no one can seize, that no one can, that is hardest to impair, Bitcoin is the hardest to impair property. It's technically, I would say it's probably the hardest to tax, the hardest to destroy, and the hardest to seize, and the hardest to impair of any property available to you to purchase at this point. And we'll talk about it more when we get to talking about proof of work and mining and the like, because you can go really deep into the basis of security for this property. But for the purposes of the Bitcoin standard right now, I think the most important thing to be said is it's the hardest thing to confiscate on Earth.
Yep.
And I joke, you can't take it with you. If I shoot you in the head, you can't take your gold with you. The Egyptian pharaohs built pyramids to take the gold with them. They were all robbed. Mm-hmm. If I said to you, take $1 million and buy some property, and you have to make sure that, and you're going to be murdered by somebody that you and your family next week, buy some property that they won't get after you're dead. What is that property? Securities and bonds and currencies won't last. Yeah. Gold, all these things are seizable. You can't take them with you. But if you buy Bitcoin and you hold the private keys in your head, when you die, the Bitcoin goes with you and no one else gets their hands on it. And the significance of that is because it's impossible to confiscate with force, and because it disappears with your death, then any hostile actor always has an incentive to negotiate with you. Because it's better for me to hold a gun to your head and take half of it than pull the trigger and get none of it.
Yep.
And that's not true with any other property. In all other cases, I can pull the trigger and get all of it.
Yeah.
And so you have an unstable situation with that property. And the interesting thing is that confiscation element, it works at the individual level, the institutional level, and the nation state level. So if one nation is going to declare war on another nation and murder everybody, they get their gold.
Mm-hmm.
They also get their land. They also get their factories. I mean, there was a joke, neutron bomb, I'll just nuke you and we'll leave the cities. Mm-hmm. I might get the gold, the silver, the farmland, the buildings, the factories, the ships, but I wouldn't get the Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so the spoils of war, Bitcoin is not spoils of war. With regard to a bank or a financier, if you own the Bitcoin and someone puts a claim against you, the way it normally works is like, I've got $1 million with a bank and I borrow against it, and then they decide to mark my securities down and they force liquidate me and they sell all my securities and take my property. That happened with Archegos. I mean, it happens all the time. It happens all the time on crypto exchanges. Mm-hmm. If you have your crypto on the exchange or your Bitcoin and you borrow against it, and then you can't meet a margin call, they can force liquidate your assets and they seize them. But if you pull your assets off the exchange, and if you hold your private keys, then your bank can't seize your assets in a hostile fashion. They would be more likely to negotiate with you. Mm. And because you can take custody of it, you don't necessarily need to rely upon this all or nothing. Either I give you all my stocks and I borrow against them, or you have none of them. We could split the difference with, I give you proof that I have it, right? Proof of reserves without the transfer of the asset in return for a different type of loan. All stress will accelerate the adoption of new technology. When people are fighting wars, like when we're fighting wars, we were hauling over C-130s or freighters, air freighters full of pallets of cash, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So normally the way you fight wars is with gold or with cash or with something. And if you're cut off, right, and you need to buy or sell materials of some sort, you need hard currency. So I think that, it will accelerate the adoption of technology like Bitcoin. And coming back to this issue, right, because it's not confiscatable, it doesn't invite violence on your person from other family members. Like, for example, you ever worry about being murdered by a family member because of whatever your will says? If you had your Bitcoin in a multi-signature relationship or a multi-sig something or other, then maybe it changes the dynamic. So I think all sorts of violence, against the individual, against the company or the institution, or against the municipality or the nation state, I think those are all less likely and less likely to happen and more likely to result in negotiation.